Welcome to the Radical Lifestyle Podcast, brought to you by Generation to Generation, where you will be inspired by the past, equipped for the present, and prepared for the future as we engage in conversations with people from around the world. Hello everyone, this is Andrew and Daphne from Generation to Generation, and our guest today is John Frady. John, for people that don't know who you are, can you just say a bit about where you're from and what you do?
I'd certainly be happy to do that, Andrew. That's probably most people who are wondering who I am. I'm John Frady. I'm the pastor of spiritual development at Celebration Church. Celebration is a church in the New Orleans area, and we're a multi-site church, and we have multiple campuses in different places. And I've been working here for about 20 years now.
Yeah, we were just talking before we went on about how long we'd known each other. How long?
That's right.
That's 17 years.
That's 17 years.
At least, I think it was 2003. So yeah, that's 17, 18 years now. That's a long time.
It is a long time.
Yeah, let's not reflect on that too much right now.
Yeah, we met Daphne and she told us about her children, and then we met you, I think, in the upcoming days. And so
Yeah,
that was before the beard, I think.
that was way before the beard. So for people that listen to this and they say, you know what, I like this John, I want to find out more about him, see what he's involved with, where can they do that?
Oh, well, you can certainly look at celebrationchurch.org. That's our website. I do have a blog with varied items on there. It's johnjfrady.com. It's JOHNJFRADY.com.
Okay, and I will get those links. I'll put them in the description box. So for people listening, they're there ready for you to go and check out.
Oh, sure.
So, before we move on, I'm intrigued. What's in this blog? What do you write on?
Well, I probably reinvented it several times over the years. I've written, certainly about church leadership stuff. I've written health, things about my own health, things about my own spiritual journey, things about my own health journey, some funny things about that. I always have something that is unusual, it seems like, with my health. And so I've been writing about that. And then just about things that I've learned about church and things that I've learned being a Christian over the last several year.
Okay, so give me three things you've learned about church. I'm intrigued.
Well, one thing you can learn about church is no matter what system I've ever been in, I've over the years I've been a part of several different churches, even though I've been here for 20 years. But what I've learned about church is that you can only do what you can do when you can do it.
Say that again.
You can only do what you can do when you can do it. Uh-huh. Basically, what that means is there are times that is going to be ripe for you to move certain things forward, or to take care of certain projects, or to minister to certain people, or to begin a new ministry. And there are certain times that seem to work perfectly for that, and there are other times that won't be right. And so there's some things you can do right when you come on, serving at a church or being in a church, or there are things that you can do after the pandemic that you might not be able to, you probably couldn't do before the pandemic. And what is smart is to try to ascertain what those things are and when the best time to implement them are.
Wow. Come on, give us another one.
Okay. Something I've learned about church. I've learned that change is hard for everybody, even people who want it. Even people who want things to change. It's still, there's still a lot of work that's involved in doing it. That's where I often come in, where the work is involved, it seems like. But there's a lot of work that has to happen in people's lives in order for things to do it. The other thing that I've learned about church, and this is actually kind of a humorous thing, is that everyone in church has a selective memory, including me. And so if you look back and be like, oh no, this is the way we do it, And people are like, no, that's not how we do it. We do it like this. We're going to do it like this. And oh no, last time we did this and this, and I remember certain things because I have selective memory, just like everybody else does. And so working through those things can be interesting and fun at times.
Well, if you put those three things together, it makes a very interesting journey.
When we do pastors and leaders conferences, often they want to start putting in changes, implementing things that we've talked about, and we say to them, slow down. About what you're saying about how no one really likes change, even those that want it. And we say to pastors, the best way to go about bringing change is speaking about it, delivering the values to the people until they own those values, and then they want the change. And at least then you've got people on the same side when you start to try and go through that process. Is always the best way. If people come to you as a leader saying, hey, I think we should do this, and then you as the leader are going, that's a great idea, let's see if we can do that. And then suddenly the change is coming from the people as opposed to you trying to get the change in the people or the people on board with what you're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, if you're not timely with the change, you might end up being the change, and you have to be careful about that. You got to figure out when the best time to do those things are.
And people, there's the whole visionary early adopters, laggards thing that some people want change and run with it, some want to watch and then go with it, and some will take a long time. And that's not their fault exactly, is it? Because it's just their character and who they are.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it is who they are. They have, different people have different biases and different good and bad, and they have different things that they've been accustomed to, and they have different ways of thinking. And so some things people might jump on, and some things people just need a little bit of time, and some people need to taste it a little bit to understand what they're going to do.
Yeah, there's the visuals as well. Those that can grasp the thing by hearing, those that grasp by seeing, those that grasp it by doing. I'm sounding very knowledgeable about this. This is really, I'm impressing myself. But am I right? Well,
yeah, it's those different learning styles that people have. And some of it is like, what is it? There's one that's, cognitive. Some people can just understand something just cognitively. Some people have to, like affective is that other, you have to, I can't remember what that is, but it's another learning style. And then there's kinesthetic, where you're actually getting into, hands-on type stuff, and you're working through it, and people have to experience it in different ways.
Well, how do you manage this? How many people at Celebration, roughly, all the campuses?
Our membership is about 10,000 people. And of course, we have gone back and forth with our attendances, based on the pandemic. But right now we're running close to 4,000 people a weekend, probably right now, building back up. We have a lot of people still online with us working through. And so we're building back up our average attendance. Of course, people aren't there every week, but that's about what we are running.
So how do you affect change with so many people and keep people on board?
I was about to say, having a church in New Orleans, you're having change quite frequently. Now sometimes
Absolutely.
Those changes are repetitive, so alluding to hurricanes, for example, and obviously we all know about Katrina and what happened there. And so living in this area, have those things and having to adapt, overcome, and changes that you've had to make during those processes, did they prepare you for COVID, and were there things that helped in this, or is this just a whole other ball game?
I believe that it did. Katrina was certainly a big, how to do, when it came. We came, we had one campus at the time. We had just gone multi-site with our second campus 2 weeks before, and Hurricane Katrina came and wiped out our largest campus. And so we had to take all of our ministry. Oh, and we lost 60% of our congregation because some of them moved away and never came back, or they moved to other parts of across the Lake Pontchartrain or somewhere else. But so we got used to figuring out what we needed to do for the weekend to happen, and just for, to get our life groups or cell groups going in different areas. And so it was that was a struggle, but we learned a lot about change during that time. There was a whole lot about change during that time, that we had to realize, okay, hey, we can't do what we typically did because of this space that we're in, or because what are the conditions we are in, or the people, or the volunteers, or the leaders, or whatever the situation is. And so we had to adapt quickly to that. And I think that for the pandemic, that there was some similar things, but it was very different, as well, because it was happening. And with Hurricane Katrina, we had the Calvary people who could come in to help. We had people from other parts of the country and nation and world, and they can come in for a week or two, and they give us, a lot of help with construction, or with whatever, food or whatever. But with the pandemic, it's very interesting, because it really, has impacted everybody everywhere. But that came, and the shutdown came, and we had to figure out, okay, how can we go online with, 8 different locations, 2 different languages, in a couple days' time? When we really weren't, we were doing that a little bit, but with our different locations, we actually had live preaching and live services more than we did video. And so we had to help all of those come on board in a matter of 2 or 3 days. And we're able to do that. But looking back at it now, when we talk about it, it's interesting, because sometimes people will talk about the pandemic, but what they'll say is, well, before the storm, and when they say the storm, they're talking about Katrina, and so, because we will accidentally, interchange those words, the storm, the pandemic, just thinking through. And so those things, I think it did prepare us for the pandemic, but I think it was in a very different way. It's sort of like, I would liken it to, the people of Israel were, up against the Red Sea when they were being chased when they left Egypt, and, the Egyptians were coming on them, and God told Moses, Moses held his staff out, and the wind blew all night, Bible says, and the waters were parted, and they walked through. But I always wondered if 40 years later, when they got ready to cross the Jordan, if people were like, okay, no, when you cross the Jordan, when you cross the body of water, this is how God does it. He holds, somebody holds up a stick and the staff, and water parts, and we do it. But it was a completely different type of change they had to go through. But I think that once you go through one particular kind, you have to kind of change and help people through that. You have to help them understand how change happens, but that it doesn't just always follow the model that the last change did. It's like things in the church, sometimes you hear people say, one move of God always kind of comes in conflict sometimes with the next move of God. Because they're like, oh, hey, no, this is how God works. No, God works this way. God works this way. No, he's doing it this way now. And so it's important. What I've learned through that, it's important not to confuse the method of how he works in one change with the next, because it may be completely different, which has been that way with the pandemic.
It reminds me of Moses, when on one occasion he was told to strike the rock, and the next occasion he was told to speak to the rock. But it's because God was wanting to do different things, and he was wanting to show his power, and this was of him, and Moses, you just speak. But when Moses struck it, as he'd been told to previously, he was taking the glory and honor away from God. So
Absolutely.
that understanding those different, not dynamics, different ways of change are beyond us, because Moses didn't have a clue why he had to be so obedient in that small thing.
Absolutely.
So if you've gone through all these changes and what you've learned about church, in the middle of all this, what have you learned about yourself through all this?
Oh, gracious. I think I've learned a lot about myself. When Hurricane Katrina happened, I've learned, I am a workaholic. everybody kind of around here, they kind of know that. And I have to force myself to rest. And so, when Hurricane Katrina happened, it came, or we actually ended up evacuating on a Saturday. And the Friday before, which was my day off, I realized that day I worked 16 hours. And so I told myself later, I was like, if I would have known Katrina was coming, I would have just taken the day off. And so I think one of the things I've learned about myself is that, I have to have enough faith in God and be able to realize that He's going to help things happen, whether I spend all that time or not. And I have to, I'm certainly going to be faithful, and I'm going to pull my weight, and I'm going to do everything that I'm going to do, but that I have to be respectful of that He's, giving me a command to rest as well, which I am not a good example of taking a Sabbath or even a portion of it sometimes, and so I have to, I've learned that about myself, in Katrina. I remember there was a man who was on one of our worship teams, and he was telling us about a cruise he and his family were going on. And I said, well, really? I said, didn't you just go like to Disney World? And he said, oh, well, that was 6 months ago. And I said, oh, really? And I realized, at that time after Katrina, is that he had been on those 2 major vacations during that 6 months, and I hadn't even taken a day off at all during that time. And I realized at that time how hard that was for me and for my wife.
Exactly.
And for the people I'm leading too, because they need me to take a break as much as I need to take a break.
And I think as a leader, we have to role model taking a break.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise the people around us will feel guilty, and they may not be able to handle the stress of working to the same measure as you can, and then we start losing people.
We were very similar. We at one point went, I think, about 3 years without a holiday. And we then started to really dive into a lot about this, taking the Shabbat and the days of rest, but also, are we taking breaks? And I think it's important, generally speaking, anyway, but when you're in an intense environment as well, so whether you're talking about going through COVID right now or a Katrina situation where you could be working 24/7, there's so much to do, and it's not just the work but the intense environment that you're walking through and the season. And so even more so important that you force yourself to take those breaks in those intense seasons to look after yourself, your family. So it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting hearing you saying that the importance of, especially for people like us who just work constantly. And if we didn't force ourselves to take the breaks, we would just keep going and going and going.
But it's interesting, isn't it, what taking a break means to different people. Some people say, right, you go away to this remote retreat,
desert island somewhere,
and you just have don't take anything with you, and you just have that peace and quiet. Will drive you crazy. But for somebody else, it may be just what they need. So, what does taking a good break look like for you? Your wife is going to thank me for this.
She is going to thank you. She's probably, she's the number one cheerleader of me taking a break. It means several things. One of the things it means, I do have to I catch up on some sleep, but what we found is that we just celebrated our 30th anniversary a couple of weeks ago, and what we realized on this little break we took, we didn't go all that far and we didn't spend a lot of money, but what we saw is that the time that we were away, is that we spent time not just in relaxation, but in recreation. And for us, what we found is that we have to kind of balance those out, because we both work very, very hard. And so we found that, we also need to play hard in the times that we're off. And so we're learning how to do that. And so that's about, for myself, that's what I've learned I have to do. And she's learned that I have to do is I have to not just lay around, which I mean, I might do that for a half a day or something like that. If I'm if I'm just, I might sleep late or do something like that. But there's only so long that you can do that. You have to play hard as well.
Yeah,
So,
I think if you sleep too long, you end up having to have a nap from the sleep because you're just exhausted from sleeping too long.
I'll get a headache.
How that works.
You get a headache from oversleeping, and so it's weird. It's like, okay, but then I have to have something to do. Like we have to make a plan. And even it may be like a simple plan, where I'm like, you know what, during this time off, I want to read this book, and I want us to go hiking, or I want us to, go to the beach someday, but like it's simple plans. And so it's very flexible because, I just want to be able to do what we need to do, but we have to have a basic plan. If not, we'll end up laying around and basically feeling like we wasted the day.
Yeah. So going back to the theme that we seem to have landed on of what you've learnt about church, people, church is people. And
yes,
I hear
is.
so many leaders being driven by people's crises. People, everybody has something that is urgent, something they need you for, something that can't wait, something that they feel is impacting their lives. How do you maneuver that?
Oh, that is, you can, I guess you can tell my answer just by the sigh.
Easily done when you've got 10,000 people.
Well, it's hard. In the position that I'm in now, it's actually a little easier for me because they typically go to other people first now, because I'm more of like across all of our campuses in the position that I'm in. But you have the same thing with people on your staff, people who are on staff who have those needs, who need things from you, who do that. But people coming at you, you have to learn when you have to be able to almost develop a sense of, when is this really important? I started, I'd hear something, I'd be like, oh, hey, this is something we need right now. I have to take care of right now. If I'm not taking care of this person, then I'm not being a good person in ministry. And sometimes that can be true, and God will drop things in you, but you have to be able to sense, okay, there's problem. Everybody's got these issues. Everybody's got these problems. They didn't get into these problems, or these problems didn't happen instantly. And so I have to know, that I don't have to always drop everything that I'm doing and instantly take, minister to simply to them. I know people talk about, Jesus leaving the 99 to take care of the one, but I think he was probably also very selective about when he did that or when that was needed to happen. You have to, have to have the big picture and the small items in the mind at the same time. And I think that's one. There was one time for a period of 3 years, I was a campus pastor at our largest campus here. And everybody would fill out these communication cards every week at the end. And our people were very much trained to, like, any prayer requests they had, any needs they had, any whatever they had, to write those out on those cards. And by the end of the day, by the end of the weekend, we'd have a stack of those cards about like that. And so I would take those home, on the rest of the day on Sunday when I should be relaxing or doing something different. And I would take time to go through each of those cards. And, and a lot of the people, I felt like I needed to either text or I needed to do something, because it's just the hurt that people are going through and the things that people are going through are just amazing to me. The amount of problems that people have and the thing. But what I also found out is reading those week after week after week after week after week is you begin to find out how many of the people have those major crises week after week after week after
Yeah.
week, the same people. And so you realize, okay, you know what, I can help them with this, but if I spend an hour or so with them this week, I'm gonna have to spend an hour or so with them the next week and the week after. And so that's when being at a church that's has life groups or cell groups is good, because you can help other people. But for me, I didn't deal with it real well, especially for the first year and a half of going through those every week. And I found myself rewarding myself for when I went through those. I would sit instead. I used to sit at home and do them. And Kathy said, "Well, can you at least, I don't know." She said, "Yeah, I want to have some time with you this afternoon. What are we going to do?" And so we would end up going to like Dairy Queen or going to somewhere. And I started gaining weight because every Sunday I'd be going eating a large Blizzard while I was going through the communication cards, sitting at Dairy Queen. And so, but it's things that you learn. Like I had to start sharing that with people. And I was assigning them to people to do, but I had to start sharing hey, let's go through these. And when I started doing that, there were people who would help me, who were basically sitting there through having heard the sermon 2 or 3 times, other staff who could actually sit there and sort those things just as well as I did. So there's a lot of delegation I had to learn. You have to learn times to be like, you know what, this person's crazy and they're going to be crazy tomorrow. And so let me wait and help them tomorrow.
Yeah, I was going to say, being a group with small groups or life groups must help massively. If you're a pastor of a church that doesn't have that, and you have the kinds of numbers that we're talking about, but even far less, it can just be so overwhelming to handle all of that. But being able to have those small group leaders that you can help distribute the people's needs to, and of course they have their people they're responsible for, so that must alleviate a lot of the pressures from the senior leadership.
Well, that's what Jethro came along and said.
Yeah, and
yes,
I was going to ask another question. Did you want to?
No, go on then. No.
I was just going to say, you brought up within that the work-family dynamic, and
yes.
I was going to say, how do you handle that now? From going through all these things that you've gone through, how do you balance the work-family dynamic, caring for the space at your home and that time, and not having the two sort of just bleed? And
yeah, I'm going to jump in because we'll lose the point. Come back to that because John said something quite a bit ago and it'll get totally lost if I don't.
Yep.
But it pressed my button. You said Jesus went after the one and left the 99, but you reckon he was quite specific about that one he went after. And I just wanted to point out that in Matthew, that one was a child. That's
bringing the generation to generation spin.
Well,
well, that's good.
But it's true. He probably left the point he was making. I would go after a child, so he was very specific. So I just wanted to say that before it got lost in the us moving
I'm glad
on.
you did that. I would rather in those emergency times, I would be more likely to do that to help a child, I think, than I would for some of our adults.
Well, the other thing is,
although I love them all too, but but that's where.
Yeah.
The other thing that I have found really useful in when we're talking with people is if I help someone, before I help them a second time, I will have given them something to do. Go read this book, listen to this, or do something. And if they can't do that, I'm not going to see them again, because you have to ensure that those people are working harder on their life than you are. And I've said that to pastors and leaders, and they say, good idea. And they said when they started doing it, their workload plummeted because, people didn't go away. And I mean, you don't have to reject people. You can say, well, I'll see you again when you have done these things, and then you can talk to them about what they've done, and it stops you being sucked into this bottomless pit of people who just want your time, really.
That's really good advice there. I think I'm going to say, hey, go read the entire Bible and then come back.
Backwards.
And tell me what you think. Detailed notes of what you think and how each chapter and verse fits to your situation.
There was a pastor in Singapore, quite a large church, and there was a person that wanted his time, and so he arranged to meet with them. You may know this, be able to tell the story better than I can, so if I get something wrong, then you can. But so he met with this person, and he said to them, you tell it, because I'm going to get some details wrong in this.
This person came and said, we don't get as much teaching as we used to do in the church. And it was a big church. And so the pastor said, well, I'll give you some teaching now if you like. So this person was like, oh, I get teaching from this pastor. And so he said, okay, here's the teaching. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength. Now, when you've done that, come back and I'll give you some more.
That's a lifelong journey.
It is. But it's
true. It's a lifelong task.
You know, we want more teaching, but we haven't done the last thing. Anyway, get back to your family thing. I jumped in on that.
So the question of how do you help balance the work family? Like, I mean, there are probably principles we can learn here, not just for people in ministry, but for even high power business people. How do we juggle work life balance? How do we balance those out?
It's a constant struggle for me, but I actually feel like I learned a little bit about it during the pandemic, because we had the shutdown, and my wife and we were at home, and both of us were working at home on Zoom, and we were in a small place, small condo, and we were both working, and we had to balance out some of the different things, and I feel like we kind of set some boundaries for ourselves, even that we do. And so I feel like those have helped a little bit, for now, where we are now, after when things are opening back up, because I guard my time off a little bit more now. And so what I'll find myself doing is I'm working, and I was always working before, but I find myself, okay, I'm going to work hard here, and here. And then this day we're supposed to be off, I'm going to be off. And because, we got used to some different times being around each other. And so we found that we have to spend that even more. That's been a struggle for especially me over the years. My wife and I, we've been married 30 years now, and we've never had children of our own. And I found myself over the years in ministry of rationalizing the amount of work that I'm doing, because, well, I don't, why do I need to go home? Because we're not taking care of little ones, and like other people are our age. And so I'll stay and do this, and I'll be the one to stay and sacrifice my time. I'll be the one to do that. And then I realized that, really during the pandemic, that, what, God he wants me to take that time and spend with my wife just as much as he does what I would spend with children. And he wants me to have that, he designed the rest, not just because we have responsibilities with children and other, but he designed it for us to be replenished, to spend time in his presence, and in his presence with each other, with my wife and with others. And so I think I'm not sure I can really totally answer your question, because it's a constant battle that I have, and I reset goals every break that we have, because I'm like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do this better, and I do it better for like a month, and then I slowly slip into there. So I'm not an expert on that. I'm not the person to watch. I'm the person that's struggling with it, just like everybody else, trying to figure out how to balance the time with my wife and with.
In a way, I think it's good that it's nice to hear from someone who hasn't got it figured out. It's that people can hear, oh, here's someone who doesn't necessarily have this figured out, but realizes that it's important enough to struggle with it and to constantly reevaluate. And I think you're right. You may have had a balance before COVID that worked well, and then you have COVID, and that's thrown in the air. So you have to reevaluate again this new season that we're walking through. And when things start to ease up, it's important people reevaluate again. How do we do it here? So I like that you kept saying we're having to constantly reevaluate, and how we're doing this. And I think just those things that you've talked about are important for people to take on board and apply to their situations.
Yeah, and of course my wife helps me. She helps me tremendous. Kathy, she helps me realize, hey, when you're hitting that point again where we're not getting to spend a lot of time, or she'll just say, hey, I miss spending time with you. We missed last week's, the day off for there, but what are we going to do this week? How are we going to do that better? And so she really helps keep me balanced, but we're just still a struggle for both of us.
Yeah.
So as we come in towards the end, John, let's have one more thing that you learned about church, something on the, I was going to say, the more positive, the one thing you've learned about church that you really, really appreciate.
Okay. The thing that comes to mind is, from years and years and years ago, I served at a church, and this is going to come out starting off not sounding positive, but it is going to end up that way. But I served at this church, and I was working with the young people, and I was working with the worship ministry, and it was a church that was in it wasn't in the ghetto, but it wasn't far. It was in a kind of a bad part of town, and we were right across the street from a naval housing place, and we were trying to reach out to some teenagers who were there, and an old man in the church had passed away, and he had asked everybody to give money to the youth ministry instead of flowers. And so with that money, we bought these basketball goals, and that were portable that we could roll out. And so we would roll them out every week in the middle of the week, right across where it was in plain view of sight of the naval housing facility, and we would just start playing and just invite whoever we saw just to come play. And so my budget, I had the lowest budget ever for that year. I think I had $1,000 a year for working with the teenagers. And I was like, okay, what can I do? And so we realized we wanted to buy drinks, sodas and stuff for everybody when they would come, or water, or whenever they would come. And so, but we didn't have an ice machine. And I realized that in the church that they had all these ice cube trays. Well, and the first day I went, and so we emptied out the ice cube trays, and it was all yellow, the ice, because they hadn't used them in a long time. And we refilled them, and we'd use those. We used them for about a month. And teenagers were coming, they were playing, and we were reaching out, we were growing. And I had one Sunday morning, like 5 minutes before the worship service is about to happen, which is always when somebody confronts you when you're going to lead worship. But a lady comes up to me and she says, we realize that you are using authorized kitchen equipment weekly without permission from the chairwoman of the kitchen committee. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, we're not cooking anything. I don't understand what's going on. Kitchen equipment. What are you talking about?
Andrew, do not finish it. Do not finish the podcast at this point, because this is meant to be a positive one, right? Okay.
Yes, this is supposed to be positive. This is supposed to be positive. And
what I'm learning here is that we need to set up a kitchen committee when we get home.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We'll have a kitchen committee. Yeah.
That's right. Well, and I said, what are you talking about? And she said, it's come to our understanding that every week you and other people, young people, have been going in and getting ice from the kitchen every week. Terrible. And I said, the ice cube trays? I said, is that what you're talking about? Is that the kitchen equipment? And she said, yes. She said, you haven't had permission from the kitchen committee chairwoman. And I said, well, who is that? And she said, it's me. and she was just I just stood there, and of course the time getting closer and closer to the worship service starting, to me have to be positive in front of everybody, to do everything. And anyway, I just looked at her, and she just was just tearing me up one side and the other, with her words. And finally, I stopped, and I was actually starting off trying to be a little condescending, but it turned out to be something that really touched her heart in there. And I said, I apologize. I said, we should have asked you if we could use the ice cube trays each week. I said, but we look across the street and we see all of these families from the Navy, and not a single one of them is a part of this church, and none of them leave their homes on Sunday morning, to go to any church. And we just want to keep them from going to hell. And I said, may we please use the authorized kitchen equipment of the ice cube trays every week to offer them some drinks, just to while we're playing basketball, just to bring them closer to us. And what's interesting is that the demeanor and the facial expression of that lady changed when she thought of young people who needed to really need to learn about the Lord and to come to know him. And do you know, for the rest of my ministry there, though, she was the biggest proponent of the youth ministry and of reaching out to teenagers and to reaching out to people across the street. And I had, that wasn't my last encounter with her in the kitchen committee. I got in trouble, I think, for using a spatula one time. But
for using what?
A spatula. I never did use a rolling pin because I figured they might could use it to hit me with. But the thing is what I've learned is that people often, they get into their ministries at church, and they get so wrapped up into the tiny parts of what they're doing, is that they really forget what ministry is all about and what the church is all about, and also really can't come to grips with letting people use ice cube trays or sharing what we have. And but when it comes to ministry's sake, they'll often finally get to when they realize what something is going to do and the impact that it can really have, they are open.
Andrew, you need to finish this podcast. I am beside myself. I hope the people listening managed to hold together to hear the end of the story, because by the time I'd gone through spatulas, rolling pin,
ice trays,
I thought you were going to say, and she realised that these young people across the street needed ice cube trays. So, John, we have not had a podcast quite like this, but it has been absolutely fantastic talking to you.
It's true, though. What? It's always best to get the kitchen committee on your side.
It is.
That is a good learning point.
It is very important.
And in all seriousness, it is interesting. Sometimes the people that can cause you a problem at the beginning can end up being your biggest cheerleaders.
Absolutely.
If you're able to pull them on team. And so that you can't just see someone who's causing you what you perceive to be a silly problem and then sort of write them off. Actually, if you do take the time, there can be some gems in there. John, before we completely lose it, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure when we get to spend time with you or Kathy and get to catch up some. So thank you so much. And we're going to have you back again, because people that don't know, we did have a subject we were going to talk about. Anyway, we didn't even touch that. So
Absolutely.
it went a completely different direction. So we'd love to have you come back and to talk about that subject.
Sure.
But then again, that might go in a different direction as well. So we'll see what happens. But thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If it inspired you, please rate us and subscribe on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or another podcast platform.